Thank you. No, I'm great to see everyone. Thank you, John. I'm really excited actually to be able to introduce our speaker. And from the moment this project began, I was like, I can't wait to get Kelly here to speak to the Historical Society on this topic. So, by way of introduction, if you don't know Kelly, and even if you do, you probably don't really know Kelly. Dr. Kelly C. Jordan is a retired U.S. Army Lieutenant Colonel, Professor of Military and National Security Studies at American Military University, and is former Commandant of Cadets at Culver Military Academy from 2008 to 2013. Dr. Jordan received his BA from the Virginia Military Institute, graduating with academic distinction and as a distinguished military graduate. He holds an MA and Ph.D. in military history from The Ohio State University. And is also a graduate of the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College. As an academic, Dr. Jordan is an award-winning professor who has served on the faculties of the United States Military Academy at West Point, the United States Army Command and General Staff College, United States Naval War College, and the University of Notre Dame. As a scholar, he's the author of numerous military history and leadership studies publications. So please, everyone, welcome Dr. Kelly Jordan.
Thank you for the invitation for the Culver Historical Society. Thank you to the Public Library for hosting me, and thank you for coming out on a Saturday morning. I will add one thing to my introduction that I just got to brag. It's not about me. I just put in my first doctoral students, which, if you know, as an academic, that is a big thing. So now I have helped somebody else earn their doctorate. I just did it in May. So Dr. Chris Suhar is now doing it, and so what has added to my repertoire with American Military University is I'm now on the doctoral faculty as well, which I enjoy. So I wrote a book about Gignilliat, and it took me about 8 years to research it. The book is here for sale if you want, no pressure, but there is a softbound and a really beautiful hardbound version that I highly recommend. But I lived with him in my head for 8 years. I really resonate with him. He was a VMI graduate, as am I. He was Commandant of Cadets at Culver, as am I. He served as a military officer, as did I. So I really resonated a lot with him. And so it took me, I just got fascinated by reading Arms and the Boy, and I just kept looking, and I said, I really would like to write a biography about him. And I talked with Paul Gignilliat about this, and he graciously supported me throughout this entire thing, and then I really hurried it through to get it done in time. So today what I'd like to do is share with you some of what I've learned. I'm going to speak at an East Coast clip, going on there, because there's a lot. But what I would do is give you a 30-minute kind of, overview of his life, of things you know, things maybe you've heard about, things maybe you haven't heard about, and then open it up and have some time for questions. So one of the things that I've learned about Gignilliat, and I'm guilty of this as well, is that we tend to look at him in kind of a very narrow view over there. We pigeonhole him into something. And what I'm hoping to do is to broaden that aperture a little bit to give a more of a broader perspective of him. So I'll start with his background. The Gignilliat family was from France, and then they moved to Switzerland. They came to America in 1680 and lived in South Carolina. About a century after that, they moved to Georgia, and they settled in Darien, Georgia, which is a little town just south of Savannah. His grandfather and his father were both lawyers. They were both leading citizens in Darien. His father, William Robert Jr., was a lawyer and also served in the Confederacy as an officer during the Civil War. His mother, Harriet Walker Hattie Haywood, was from a leading family in South Carolina. They had 7 children over the course of 18 years. Most were named after family members, but their 6th child, Leigh Robinson, was named after a friend that Gignilliat's father had met during the Civil War. Gignilliat is born on July 4th, 1875, a very patriotic day, if there ever was, to do it. And he lives in Georgia for 9 years. 4 years after he was born, his mother died as a result of childbirth. And then when he was 9, he was sent north to boarding school to Emerson Prep, which is a very well-known boarding school in Washington, D.C. It educated presidents' sons and things like that. So he's a boarding student up there as a young 9-year-old boy. And when he's 11, his father dies. So, and his namesake, Leigh Robinson, was a lawyer in Washington, D.C., and essentially adopted young Leigh. So Leigh continued to attend Emerson Prep, but was no longer a boarding student. He lived with the Robinson family, who were childless. He does very well at Emerson Prep, but when he's first there, he's bullied a little bit. He's very thin, always was in his life, and skinny, and they had to wear these black stockings, like you see there. And Gignilliat didn't have much money. The stockings that he wore weren't of the highest quality, and they accentuated his skinny legs, he said. So what he learned, though, is that if he developed some expertise in some area, for him it happened to be declaiming, which is memorizing and then presenting poems and speeches, but some level of expertise that would give you, that would help boys avoid bullying and help them with their self-confidence. There's no question that he's going to college, so he and Leigh Robinson decide that he's going to attend the Virginia Military Institute. Leigh Robinson knew the superintendent over there to study engineering. His grandfather, father, and oldest brother were lawyers, and all the rest of his brothers were engineers, so this is pretty natural. He excels academically and militarily at VMI. But his first year, he's 16 years old when he attends. That sounds young, but it's not unusual at the time. But he's caught drinking. His entire class, to prevent him from being dismissed, his entire class takes the pledge that says, we will not touch a drop of alcohol for the rest of the year if you will allow Leigh Robinson to stay. That's amazing. Here's what's more amazing. The third class, so the next older class, took the same pledge. That's unheard of in military school. One pledge, something. 2 pledges, unbelievable. Leigh does very, very, very well. He's a smart kid. He's involved in numerous activities, the Glee Club, the German Club, the Declaiming Society, things like that. He's still very skinny, though. He tries playing football at a time when it was very, this is the time when Teddy Roosevelt, they tried to get football outlawed. It was so dangerous. Leigh breaks his jaw. Leigh Robinson says, that's it, we're not playing that anymore. So the only sport he can really do is riding horses. And he becomes a superb horseman throughout the course of his life. So by his first class year, he's a recognized leader. He earned the top rank, military rank he could every year. He was a cadet corporal in his second year. He was a first sergeant his third year, and he's a cadet captain his final year. And he is the editor-in-chief of the yearbook. He is the president of the Dialectic Society. He's elected as the Grand Marshal of the final ball. He's really well thought of by his peers. But his final, so as editor-in-chief in the yearbook, they send it off, and it looks as though Leigh is going to be the valedictorian of the school. And so that's what they put in the yearbook. And if you look at the 1895 yearbook, I know all of you will, I have, it lists him as being the valedictorian. But in fact, his final semester at VMI, he was supposed to be overseeing some cadets. He ostensibly turned a blind eye, was court-martialed, and reduced to cadet private. So he graduates 4th out of 25 with academic distinction, but he is not the valedictorian. Nick, and that's him there as a first-classman, looking pretty dapper. So he's 20 years old, deciding what to do. Grandfather, father, oldest brother are lawyers. He's just earned a civil engineering degree. All his brothers are civil engineers. Leigh decides to do something a little different. He decides to take the newly created civil service exam because he wants to become a U.S. patent clerk. He goes to D.C., takes the exam, and then they say it's going to be about 4 months till you figure out. So he's got to figure out something else to do. So he takes a temporary job, putting his civil engineering degree to work. And he's surveying the new national park at Yellowstone. Now Yellowstone, if you know anything about the geography, it's up there in the corner of Wyoming and Montana, which had just become states, and so they got to figure out exactly where the boundaries are. So this is Gignilliat in what could have been his office. So he's put in charge of a small group, and he's out there doing it. Transformative experience for him, because the discipline he experienced at VMI he felt wasn't really real, was kind of, made up and all this. But here he's in charge of a small group of soldiers. He's got to go out, he's got a technical, demanding job to do for the US government. And there are true dangers. There are grizzly bears and there are poachers out there. So this is really transformative. And he's out for a couple of months. He's out there surveying June, July, comes in at the beginning of August. There's a letter waiting for him from the U.S. Civil Service. Says, congratulations, you've passed the exam, and we have a job offer for you with the U.S. Patent Office. Now this is great because only about half people pass that exam to begin with. So, but the bad news is, the letter was dated the beginning of July, and we need an immediate answer. So Gignilliat, this is the beginning of August by the time he gets the letter. So Gignilliat contacts them and says, wow, I really want the job. And they said, well, we didn't hear from you, so we gave the job away. You can come back next year and try for it again. So Gignilliat finishes up at Yellowstone, and while he was at VMI, there had been a big push for people to become teachers. His mother, highly educated, his sister, Helen, highly educated. Both of them had dabbled in teaching. So he thinks, after the experience at Yellowstone, maybe he would like to become a teacher or a commandant in a military school. So as he's taking the train back from Yellowstone to Georgia, he stops in Chicago and makes an application with a teaching agency to become either a teacher or a commandant. So he leaves there and he has no job. 6 weeks later, unbelievably, Alexander Fleet, whose school has just burned down at Missouri Military Academy, and he's brought his entire faculty and student body to Culver, he finds himself in need of a commandant, contacts the exact same teacher agency and says, I'm looking for a young commandant. By the end of 1896, Gignilliat, who left Yellowstone with no job offers, now has two. One to teach math at the Michigan Military Academy, or to be the commandant at Culver Military Academy. He decides to take the Culver job, even though it pays less, because he says, I'm only going to be there for 6 months, and then I'm going to go back to DC, and I'm going to pursue this patent officer job. Well, man plans, God laughs. So some things happen out there that change that plan. The first thing is he meets the new superintendent of Culver, Alexander Fred Fleet, who becomes a father figure to him. The second thing that happens is that he finds that he not only likes the job of commandant, but he's good at it. The third thing, though, is probably the most important. He meets Alexander Fleet's eldest daughter, Mary, who the family calls Minnie, which she hates. Imagine a family nicknaming somebody something they don't like. She liked to be called Mamie, but Gignilliat meets her as Minnie, and he calls her Minnie for the rest of his life, or Min, over there, and he meets her. He is smitten. He is smitten. By June of 1896, he writes in his memoirs, all thoughts of pursuing the patent office job have vanished. The school year ends. He's supposed to go back home to Georgia for 8 weeks. There was no summer school back then. And then come back. He's smitten. He cannot bear to be apart from Minnie. He comes back to Culver in 2 weeks, cuts his vacation short, goes to Fleet, asks his permission, and proposes to Minnie, who says yes. They're married on August 2nd, 1898. Gignilliat then thinks that he does think about leaving Culver. And he writes the superintendent of VMI and says, maybe I could come out there and be a commandant. But they find out that Minnie is pregnant with their first son, Leigh Jr., who's born in 1899. And then the second son, Fred, is born in 1901. By that point, there's no thought of Gignilliat or them leaving Culver. They do have a third child, Hank, in 1911. So Gignilliat settles into his job. He's got a great group of colleagues. He is feeling very comfortable as a military officer and as a commandant. So he really begins to implement what we would call an environment of structure, of regimentation, and of discipline. His first big test happens in October of 1900. In Culver lore, it's referred to as the Big Fire. Culver had dismissed a very popular cadet, and they told the cadets that they were not to go see him off at the train station in town. Being adolescent boys, about half of them disregard that, over 100, and they go downtown to see him off. Gignilliat hops on his favorite horse, Harry, and rides down there, rounds them all up, and brings them back to campus. Tells Fleet, we got to dismiss all of these people. Fleet, who had just lost his entire personal fortune when Missouri Military Academy burned down, is aghast. They talk all night about this, and they cannot come to to an agreement. So they have to call the Culver brothers, B.D. and E.R. from St. Louis, who come up to settle the matter for them. E.R. Culver ends up siding with Gignilliat for dismissing 105 cadets. But Gignilliat realizes that he had acted impetuously and maybe doesn't know as much as he thinks he does and needs some more mentoring from Fleet. Fleet comes to the exact same realization. So they end up having a really a deeper kind of mentoring relationship, I guess I would say. In 1902. Culver starts at summer naval camp, led by Gignilliat's brother Thomas, who he actually calls Haywood because that's his middle name. And it doesn't go very well in 1902. Gignilliat goes to Fleet and says, let me take a crack at it. 1903, he's in charge of the summer naval school. Spectacular success. So he starts to realize, between what he's doing in the winter school and naval school, that he's good at this marketing stuff. They end up starting the summer cavalry school in 1907 and woodcraft in 1912. Summer camp becomes absolutely essential to Gignilliat for the rest of his life. He's also building the military program for the winter school. And this is really what Fleet brought him in to do. And so in 1904, the Army starts inspecting schools, and they're going to identify the top 6 in the country. Culver is inspected in 1904, does fine, but is not one of the 6 identified. Gignilliat does some more work. They're inspected again in 1905, does better, but still not there. So between 1905 and 1906, Gignilliat co-ops the entire Culver community, makes tremendous changes, really works hard. In 1906, the U.S. Army inspects Culver, and it is identified as one of the top 6 military schools in the country, a designation that it retains throughout its entire association with the U.S. military until the late 1980s. So he's having great success during this time. You can see that he becomes very comfortable as an officer. He becomes very comfortable socially. That's many. And he also is comfortable officially. That's him meeting with his brother Thomas and the Secretary of the Navy. So during all this is happening, Fleet's health starts to falter. Oh, he also starts publishing too, something that he does throughout his life. Beginning in 1903, he publishes his first article in Scientific American, and he is a lifelong writer. He might be, by my assessment, the most prolific writer. He probably is the most prolific writer of any superintendent of Culver that I've been able to find. Well over 30 publications. But Fleet's health starts to fail, so he ends up serving as, beginning in December of 1908, he begins serving as acting superintendent. In 1909, the Culver family announces what is in effect the first strategic plan for Culver, called the Greater Culver Plan, and Gignilliat makes it his mission to implement that, which is what he ends up focusing on for the next 20 years, of implementing the Greater Culver Plan. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And so he's really in his element, I would say, and he has come in to his own. By the beginning of the 1910 academic year, Fleet's health is just such that he cannot continue. So Gignilliat is named Superintendent of Culver Military Academy on September 18th, 1910. 1911, the third child, Hank, is born. And then by the end of his first school year, he institutes one of the iconic aspects of Culver, the Iron Gate ceremony. He also creates the first alumni association. So these are happy things that happen. But sadly, in that same year, his brother Thomas dies. Beginning of 1912, another death affects the trajectory of his life as well. H.H. Culver Jr. dies unexpectedly. Now this is important because when H.H. Culver died in 1897, H.H. Jr. took over running the Wrought Iron Range Company, the Culver family business down in St. Louis. When H.H. Jr. dies unexpectedly, they then have to shuffle some of the brothers. So B.B. Culver had been in oversight of Culver Military Academy. He becomes the president of the Wrought Iron Range Company, and this brings E.R. Culver into direct oversight for Culver Military Academy. This starts a terrific, productive relationship for the next 18 years between Gignilliat and E.R. Culver. They really see the world, they see education, they see things the same, and this is really something that is in effect and really is important for the development of Culver for the next 18 years until E.R. dies in 1930. While this is happening, World War I breaks out in Europe in 1914. The U.S. is not involved, but in April of 1917, the U.S. becomes involved. Gignilliat had been commissioned a major in the newly created Organized Reserve in 1916, so immediately in the outbreak of war, Gignilliat is called to active duty to go and do the 90 days training required of everyone to earn a national commission so that they can lead in World War I. This is the first time we've done this. We had been mostly our junior officers had been volunteer officers up until this point. First time we've ever done this. So the 41-year-old Gignilliat, who's 5'11" and a half. He's not 6 feet tall. I mean, this is how precise he is. He's 5'11" and a half, 140 pounds. And he goes, you're right, he is a long, skinny guy over there. He goes to train with 25, 30-year-olds during his 90-day training, very physically demanding and all that. He hadn't started smoking yet, which was indicative of him later. He not only keeps up with them, he excels. Now, he had done so much prep to get there. He was involved in the preparedness movement. That's him with the Army Chief of Staff Leonard Wood. He had led the rescue effort at Logansport in 1913. He had gotten Culver invited to the inaugural parade in 1913 as well. And in 1960, he literally wrote the book on military schools, Arms and the Void, which becomes the manual on military schools until World War II. So he had done a lot of prep to get there. By the time he goes and trains as an officer, he does exceptionally well. That's him graduating from the officer training camp and becoming the only officer of the hundreds of thousands who were trained in World War I to earn a commission as a lieutenant colonel. The only one. I have corroborated this with multiple places. There is one lieutenant colonel commission throughout that entire time, and his name is Leigh Robinson Gignilliat. That's him, typical Leigh, doesn't want any other focus on him. That's him congratulating other Culver graduates who went through the same training and earned their commission. He's so highly thought of at the officer training camp that they keep him there for the second officer training camp to be a trainer. But the Army won't stand for that too long because he's a lieutenant colonel. So he's assigned as the intelligence officer for the 84th Division that's being created for World War I, based upon soldiers and conscripts and volunteers from Indiana, the states of Indiana and Kentucky. Now, we don't know what an intelligence officer is because this is the first time we ever had one. Gignilliat distinguishes himself not only as an intelligence officer, but as a trainer. He impresses the regular Army officers who were assigned the 84th Division and the commanding general. himself. So he goes throughout the entire train-up of the 84th Division to get qualified. They're qualified, and they're shipped over to Europe in September of 1918. This happens right after the Americans' first big campaign, the Meuse-Argonne campaign, during which we took a lot of casualties. General Pershing, the commanding general of the American Expeditionary Force, says we're not going to put new units in, we're going to break them up, and we're going to use them as replacements, as sources of replacements for the other units that had already been over there and been fighting. So Gignilliat's 84th Division that he spent all this time with and had developed and grown, in there, basically he'd been with them since August of 1917 until September of 1918. They're broken up. Gignilliat is reassigned as the intelligence officer to the 37th National Guard Division, the 37th Buckeye Division, from the great state of Ohio. That's where my Ohio comes in. He arrives, the Buckeye Division is assigned to the French Army, and they're fighting in Belgium. He arrives there on November 8th, 1918, and participates in the final combat actions with them until the armistice takes effect on the 11th hour, 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. Gignilliat stays with the Buckeye Division while they're on occupation duty. In 1919, he's promoted to full colonel. The Buckeye Division is released and sent home. Gignilliat is literally walking up the gangplank to get on the ship to go home, and he's called off the gangplank. He is recalled to Paris, and he is assigned by the general headquarters to become the Inter-Allied Food Commissioner for the U.S. occupied zone in the Rhineland. Now there are 4 occupation zones in the Rhineland at this time: Belgian, U.S., French, and British. Food is essential because if they don't have food, they're susceptible to unrest by many factions over there. Most concerning the communists who just completed the revolution in Russia, and they're called socialists over there, and they're trying to upset. This happens in the French and the British sectors. There is much less of it occurring in the U.S. sector, the occupied sector. Primarily because there are not food shortages. Gignilliat has figured out how to get the food, how to transport the food, and how to distribute the food effectively. It is my contention that his actions in Europe between March and June of 1919 are most responsible for him becoming promoted to general officer, because he impresses the French general who's in charge of it, a guy named Peyot. Peyot is Ferdinand Foch, the Supreme Allied Commander. He is his right-hand man. He's his most trusted subordinate. Peyot really is impressed with Gignilliat, who tells Foch, who tells Pershing. And Pershing is impressed because his section is the one that's not having the unrest over this. So when, and Peyot is friends with Gignilliat the rest of his life. Gignilliat, that's Peyot and Gignilliat coming here to visit in Culver. That's actually a picture of them in Main Guard. When Pershing becomes the Army Chief of Staff in 1921, he makes it his business to get Gignilliat to become one of his leaders. And so by the end of that year, December of 1921, Gignilliat is promoted to Brigadier General, and at the beginning of 1922, he's placed in charge of a brigade, which he commands for the entire rest of his time in the Army, until he retires in 1936, or 39, sorry. So that's an unknown part that we really never knew what Gignilliat did in World War I, and now we know, and it also, for me, really helps explain why he was promoted to Brigadier General. A guy who served for 27 months on active duty and secured 2 promotions. He secured the only commission as a lieutenant colonel. He then was promoted to full colonel, then he was promoted to Brigadier General. That is truly remarkable. That's meteoric rise in there. Now Culver in the 1920s, he's very busy doing other things. Culver is running very well by this crew over there. It's large after World War II, or World War I. It's over 700. So Gignilliat is doing other things. He is serving as the president of the National Association of Military Schools. He is also serving as essentially the international arm of the American Legion, called FIDAC. That's him with his cadet escort, looking quite dapper in Austria in 1928. And he's also serving as a brigadier general. He's helping to counter this anti-militarism campaign that has arisen in America as a result of World War I. He also starts the Skyland camps up in Glacier National Park in Montana, 1,600 miles away. One of the few things that Gignilliat does that doesn't really turn out all that well. He leads the American contingent to the first World Boy Scout Jamboree. Probably the most important, the culmination of this is he gets General of the Army's John J. Pershing to come to Culver, and he is decorated with the Distinguished Service Medal. And the guy standing next to him is Cal Chambers, who's also an important member of Culver. He is awarded the nation's second highest award for valor, the Distinguished Service Cross. So they got Pershing to come here, which was quite a coup. Now, I talked about the Greater Culver Plan, and one of the things that, he makes this his plan to do it. So the Greater Culver Plan was basically to create that infrastructure that I've outlined over there, which he does. So the Culver Plan, the Culver Military Academy plant that you get and summer school and all that, that's developed. But he's Gignilliat, so he goes beyond. He goes beyond in three different ways. He starts the radio station, the aviation program, and he gets Legion Memorial built. So during his time as superintendent, he in effect, he actualizes and goes beyond the strategic, the Culver family's strategic plan for Culver. But the pace was terrific and the physical toll on him was something. That's a pen and ink drawing from him from 1929, looking fit, dapper, and just, every bit, at the peak of his vitality. He gets ill in November of 1933. It starts out as a sinus infection, turns into a deep cold. He can't shake it. So he goes to Arizona, hoping for 2 weeks in the dry air in there that will help him recover. Doesn't happen. Minnie says, all right, that's it. She packs up and goes over to nurse him back to health. He's gone for 5 months. 5 months. And he returns just in time to be knighted by the Italian government. But his appearance has changed dramatically. And it causes a stir on campus, and it causes the Culver Education Board to think we have to have a succession plan for him because he's not going to be with us forever. So really something. So they do come up with a succession plan. They end up identifying William Gregory as the Dean of Faculty to take over some of the day-to-day, a lot of the day-to-day functions for him. They put in a new commandant, McKinney, and they take his old chief of staff, Alan Elliott, and they put him in charge. And so they're trying to kind of take the burden off Gignilliat. The idea is that from 1935 to 1940, Gregory will be tutored, he'll apprentice under Gignilliat, and then when Gignilliat retires, Gregory will become the new superintendent. Gignilliat believes this is going to be a gradual transition. Gregory, pretty competent guy, pretty capable guy, moves faster maybe than Gignilliat had thought. So by the end of 1938, it's clear that they're not going to have to wait till 1940. And Gignilliat is increasingly, kind of dissatisfied with this relationship. B.B. Culver had been the chairman of the Culver Education Foundation that had been formed as a result of the Culver Covenant in 1932-1933. B.B. Culver has done a lot, and he says it's time for me to step down. So the idea becomes up in 1939. Let's make Gignilliat the president of the Culver Education Foundation. Gignilliat's really happy about this. He goes, this is great. These are the things I can do. And we'll have a board member on campus. This will be great. So they put him in a nice office on the second floor of Legion Memorial, and he thinks he's going to be consulted and all that. He's not. The leadership, Gregory takes over and his team, and they don't really consult him much. So he starts. Now he does have more time to do things, and he has a little bit of leisure time. That's him with his favorite dog, Mussolini. We call him Mussolini. But he's not happy with this. So he and Minnie start looking, thinking about leaving Culver. They go and they check out some houses in Virginia. But then in April of 1942, Gregory is alerted that he's going to be called back to duty for World War II. And so they have to assign an acting superintendent, and it's his brother-in-law, John Seddon Fleet, not him. That's the straw that breaks the camel's back for Gignilliat. Within 2 weeks, he resigns as president of the board, and he and Minnie move to Fort Worth, Texas, to live with their middle son, Fred. Now, this is the first time that he's ever had to do, something professionally, on his own, away from Culver. And in typical Gignilliat form, he finds a way to be productive. He ends up becoming the local coordinator for the Engineering, Science, and Management War Training Program there, that basically gives training, uses all the higher education institutions in the Fort Worth area, SMU, places like that, to provide training for people who aren't in the military, but so that they can work with the War Industry Board. He really makes a significant contribution in World War II, an unsung but essential contribution in World War II. And he does that, all on his own. When the war ends in 1945, so does that program. Gignilliat then writes a manuscript in 1946 about the Culver family influence on Culver, sends it into the publisher, and they said it's good, but it might need work. 1947, he's starting to actually have some time to relax. He and Minnie can actually spend time together. Now, if you'll notice the little scamp that Minnie is over there, she's hiding a cigarette back there to do it over there. 1947, he works with his youngest son, Hank, and he writes his memoirs. However, 1947, a little bit tough year for them. Minnie had been diagnosed with breast cancer in 1944. She begins getting treatment for it in 1946, but it's a carcinoma kind of cancer that can't be operated on. In 1947, she falls and breaks her hip, her pelvis. And Gignilliat himself is diagnosed with Parkinson's, and symptoms start to manifest. So they start deciding that maybe the time is right to move to Chicago, where they can live with their eldest son, Leigh Jr., and they can get better medical treatment. So they do move to Chicago in 1948, and she ends up living with their eldest son, Leigh Jr., but he almost immediately takes up residence in the VA hospital and spends the rest of his life in the VA hospital. As that's going. So by 1950, you see he's looking significantly more infirmed. Now that's the laying of the cornerstone, ceremony for the laying of the cornerstone of the chapel on campus. 1 year later, the old man rallies one final time, and that's the dedication of the chapel itself. He gets in uniform. He's looking like the general of old one final time. In January of 1952, Minnie's breast cancer metastasizes. It's incredibly aggressive, and she dies within 90 days. In a ceremony over there. When I was writing about this, by the way, I was in a funk. After I wrote about this, for 2 days, I felt like I lost a friend. And if I may, when Jeff was reading it, he wrote me and said the same thing, that the impact of Minnie dying, as it had on Gignilliat, was substantial of there to do it. With him, 7 months later, he has a heart attack on October 28th, 1952, and he dies 2 days later on October 30th, 1952. Has a state funeral, equivalent of state funeral here at campus. He and Minnie are buried side by side in the Culver Masonic Cemetery here. In 1930, a famous poet wrote a poem about Gignilliat that some of you might be familiar with. And I think he captures in 3 stanzas aspects of Gignilliat that no one else really has. And so if I might, I just close here by reading the ones that I think are most important. He has seen the smoke of battle. He has seen brave soldiers die. And there's many a time they've caught him with a teardrop in his eye. For that heart of his is tender, and that dream of his is fine. And you'll find his fame at Culver not along the battle line. For his influence is marching in an endless line of youth, and his victories are many on the battlefield of truth. But a matchless fame has he who gives his life to boyhood and the men those boys will be. Now, when I wrote this biography, I stood on the shoulder of giants. Charles Mathers wrote the first history of Culver. Richard Davies did a lot of great work on his dissertation, and Bob Hartman wrote I don't know how many different things on it. So my idea was, if you read my book, you don't have to read all those. I don't know how many of you read dissertations for fun. I do, but you don't have to do that. But if Bob were here, I became very close friends with Bob. When I visited him in the just up the road there in his last days. And if Bob was here, he would want the last word, so I'm going to give him the second to the last word. Bob wrote in 27 in the book Lest We Forget that dissociating the history of Culver Military Academy from Gignilliat is impossible. Since then, I would add, as his biographer, dissociating the history of Leigh Gignilliat from Culver Military Academy is similarly impossible. It was a symbiotic relationship that brought out the very best in both of them, and they were both fortunate to have one another with them. So with that, thank you, and I'm happy to take your questions. That was 30 minutes of running through Gignilliat's life. Okay, yeah, but that's just...